All politics is identity politics. Welcome to Identity Politics, everyone. I'm Kevin DeAnna, back from the Patria, Italy, back from the center of our civilization, Rome. Of course, being Italian and having my last name end in a vowel, some would say I should probably be deported from America. And they're probably right. This is probably true. But there are a lot of people you need to get through before you get to me. But it is inarguable that the founding people of this country, the core, the indispensable element, is the Anglo-Saxon element. Britain is the mother country, the English are the founding stock. Up until the 20th century, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant population was the core population. One of the books that everyone should just automatically have in terms of how we got here, 101, is Samuel Huntington's book, Who Are We?, from 2004. Now, I'm pretty sure we have a ton of these books somewhere, so for subscribers and supporters of the show, I'm going to see if I could just get copies of this to you guys. It's not the edgiest book, it's not the most cutting-edge book, but it's a good foundation. Now, Huntington is best known for The Clash of Civilizations, but if you went to college or grad school, had anything to deal with government or political science or whatever else, you read Samuel Huntington. You read this guy. Democratization in Latin America, civil-military relations, the failure of modernization in post-colonial states, just like everything. I think I had him in like 7 classes. He was a Harvard professor, New Deal Democrat, former like Carter administration official, not exactly a right-wing guy. And yet, his last book was about American identity. And because of that, he spent his last years getting protested, being called a racist and a fascist and a Nazi and whatever else by the affirmative action class, because that was who was being moved into these institutions. And it should be noted, you cannot succeed more in academia than this guy succeeded. You could not be more establishment, and it meant nothing. It meant nothing. He was just a Nazi by the end. Why? Because he made the very obvious point that American identity is not infinitely flexible, that it doesn't include everyone, and that its root was the Anglo-Saxon population. He says, quote, America's core culture has been, and at the moment, is still primarily the culture of 17th and 18th century settlers who founded American society. The central elements of that culture can be defined in a variety of ways, but include the Christian religion, Protestant values and moralism, a work ethic, the English language, British traditions of law and justice, and the limits of government power, and a legacy of European art, literature, philosophy, and music. He also adds, quote, to describe America as a nation of immigrants is to stretch a partial truth into a misleading falsehood and to ignore the central fact of America's beginning as a society of settlers, unquote. This is an indispensable point. Former Commander-at-Large of the U.S. Border Patrol, Greg Bovino, made much the same point in a recent interview.
They don't care that your grandfather died at Iwo Jima or Gettysburg or who the founding fathers even are. They don't care. And I think, to me, that is a greater threat to our society and to what we have going in America that we built, that Americans built. Let me say that again. Americans built that. You know, there's an argument creeping in.
Migrants built this
that,
country.
yes, absolutely not. Americans built that. Settlers built that. So we need to keep it that way.
We are not a nation of immigrants. We are a nation of settlers, pioneers, and conquerors. This is not up for debate. So-called Native Americans were not Americans. They were not part of the polity. The Declaration of Independence called them the merciless Indian savages. Blacks were not Americans. They were explicitly excluded from political participation, and men like Thomas Jefferson wanted them sent out of the country eventually. So don't tell me that all men are created equal means they have to participate here. And while the founders clearly had an understanding of what it meant to be white, and you can find Irish and Italians and whoever else participating in the Revolution and antebellum Americum and the Civil War and whatever else without the law ever treating them as somehow non-white, that doesn't change the fact that at its core, this country was a creation of Great Britain. It's taken as common sense for a very long time. There was nothing even controversial about it. I used to work for VDare.com, an immigration control site. It was named after Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the New World. Franklin Roosevelt spoke at an event honoring her in 1937. Now, the purpose of his speech was to attack privilege and wealth, typical New Deal stuff. But he said, quote, this is FDR, we hear of the gentlemen of title who, on occasion, came to the colonies, and we hear of the gentlemen of wealth who helped to fit out the expeditions. But it is a simple fact, which cannot too often be stressed, that an overwhelming majority of those who came to the colonies from England and Scotland and Ireland and Wales and France and Holland and Sweden belonged to what our British cousins would, even today, call the lower middle classes, unquote. Now again, just note that matter-of-fact reference to our British cousins and to the sources of the original settlement, including Ireland. So forget Noel Ignatieff and how the Irish became white and all that nonsense. All this was just utterly taken for granted. Everybody knew what an American was. Everybody knew where America came from. But you never hear this kind of thing, not even from conservatives. And there are serious consequences. Because if you separate America's identity and founding from British settlement, if you pretend America began with a document rather than with British colonization, you are allowing this idea that America is based on abstractions, on ideas, on principles, on stupid principles, in fact. The fact is, America is a lot older than the Declaration of Independence. There were Englishmen here when the English Civil War was going on. Oliver Cromwell almost moved to New England. Virginia is called the Old Dominion because of its royalism. That's how old America is. But you don't hear this because there's this idiotic and destructive idea that America is a kind of anti-Europe or anti-Britain. If you believe that, you really don't have an argument when people tell you that America is just supposed to be a vehicle for universal egalitarianism and democracy. But it's not true. Even Thomas Jefferson, who I think made a huge mistake with some of the things that he wrote, but even Thomas Jefferson wanted Hengist and Horsa, the supposed leaders of the Anglo-Saxon migration to England in the 5th century, to be on the Great Seal of the United States. He called them the Saxon chiefs from whom we claim the honor of being descended and whose political principles and form of government we assumed. So don't tell me that it's just a nation of ideas. Don't tell me that Thomas Jefferson didn't care about lineage. There was this whole theory that was very influential during the Revolution. The whole point of the rebellion was to restore true Anglo-Saxon self-government and whatever else. It was a very conservative right-wing project, but this is lost now. And without it, you end up in this stupid world of abstractions and egalitarianism and deconstruction, where every professor from the subcontinent or the Pale of Settlement or darkest Africa gets to tell you what your country is all about. And yeah, downstream, this has big policy consequences because people take ideas to their logical conclusions, even if they're really stupid conclusions. But for the first time in a long time, certainly my lifetime, you now see the White House pushing against this. And this is especially important because America's 250th anniversary is this year. Now, if Kamala Harris was in there, we'd be hearing more about how America is the scene of a crime, and we didn't become a nation until transgender Nicaraguan prostitutes or whatever else fulfilled the founder's vision, but we have Trump in there. And he is hosting King Charles III, and though President Trump can hardly be considered a friend of Europe in many ways when it comes to policy, especially when it comes to energy policy, he does have a certain Anglophilia that comes out. And he said some remarkable things while hosting the king. So, for example, at a gala last night, he specifically referenced the idea that the American Revolution was fought not to create some new identity or ideology, but to fulfill the traditional Anglo-Saxon ideas of self-government. Listen to this.
From English towns and Scottish hills, from Welsh mountains and Irish villages, a people unique in history sailed across the mighty Atlantic to settle and civilize this continent in the name of God, King and country. So beautiful. They called it New England and meant that very, very literally. The first Americans saw themselves as free men carrying the forward and central liberties and ancient rights of the Anglo-Saxons into this new and beautiful world. In the eyes of America's founders, our war of independence was fought not to reject this heritage, but to reclaim it and perfect it. As the founding father, George Mason, wrote, "We claim nothing but the liberty and privileges of Englishmen in the same degree as we had still continued among our brethren when we were in Great Britain."
There's some good stuff in there, like people came here to civilize the new world. You listen carefully, you can actually hear the teeth grinding from the ethnic studies professors and the journalists as they rage against what the president just said. And perhaps even better was what he said earlier in the day on the White House lawn.
Here in the shadows of monuments to George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, honoring the British King might seem an ironic beginning to our celebration of 250 years of American independence, but in fact, no tribute could be more appropriate. Long before Americans had a nation or a constitution, we first had a culture, a character, and a creed. Before we ever proclaimed our independence, Americans carried within us the rarest of gifts, moral courage, and it came from a small but mighty kingdom from across the sea. For nearly 2 centuries before the Revolution, this land was settled and forged by men, women who bore in their souls the blood and noble spirit of the British. Here on a wild and untamed continent, they set loose the ancient English love of liberty and the Great Britain's distinctive sense of glory, destiny, and pride. And that's what it is: glory, destiny, and pride. The American patriots who pledged their lives to independence in 1776 were the heirs to this majestic inheritance. Their veins ran with Anglo-Saxon courage. Their hearts beat with an English faith in standing firm for what is right, good, and true. In recent years, we've often heard it said that America is merely an idea, but the cause of freedom did not simply appear as an intellectual invention of 1776. The American founding was the culmination of hundreds of years of thought, struggle, sweat, blood, and sacrifice on both sides of the Atlantic. Fate drew a long arc from the meadow at Runnymede to the streets of Philadelphia that ran through the lives of people born and bred on the British code that no man should be denied either justice or right. American patriots today can sing "My Country 'Tis of Thee, Sweet Land of Liberty," only because our colonial ancestors first sang "God Save the King."
Now, again, I know what you're thinking. Like, oh, it's just cliches. It's just bromides. It's just talk. 100 years ago, it would be. FDR could say the exact same thing. Nobody would care. Just harmless pleasantries, right? People would be like, yeah, well, whatever. But where we are now, this is a direct attack on everything our institutions define America as today. I mean, take the reference to Anglo-Saxon courage. Already, the usual suspects are going nuts about this. So, here's a journalist at NBC4 Washington going, oh, what did he mean by this? It sounds a little weird. It's a little scary.
Now, there was a moment earlier today while President Trump was speaking on the South Lawn with the king right behind him that caught a lot of people's attention. The president appeared to praise what he called the Anglo-Saxon courage shared by British and early Americans. Take a listen.
So what did he mean? We don't need to listen to the quote again. But what they're going to do is they're going to bring on a professor from Loyola to provide context. So you have one Carsona Whitehead. She does not, in fact, have a white head. And all these people have these little cutesy nicknames like Tish James in New York or whatever else. She's from some program about race and peace and social justice. Black professor, you already know. You already know where this is going. You already know everything she's ever said, everything she ever will say, every take she will have until the end of time. So naturally, let's go through it. What does she have to say about this?
Well, it's good that you bring this point up because I think that people aren't really aware of what America was at that time. If you go back to 1776, there were about two and a half million colonists there, and 500,000 of them were free and enslaved people who were also part of this experiment.
No, you're not part of this. You're not part of this. Leave aside this staggering claim that everybody was thinking about democracy in 1776, a term that the founders regarded with utter scorn and contempt. Insofar as anyone started using democracy in America, it basically started with Andrew Jackson. So if anything, it was more racially uncompromising than the more aristocratic sentiment that came before. But we know this, and she knows this. Well, maybe she doesn't know this, but it's not like it's a real professor. But this is the establishment narrative, right? America is not a creation of a people. It's just this spot of dirt. The mission is to have universal equality and democracy. And really, rather than the Anglo-Saxons being the core Americans, they're the ones who are the least American. This is what the message of the 1619 Project is, right? It's a new origin story. That's their words. It begins not with British settlement, but with slavery. And by the way, not that it even matters, she actually does bring it up in the interview, but she buries the main point. Oh, the blacks were indispensable to the revolution and everything else. Yeah, there were a few thousand blacks who fought for the Patriot cause, maybe 3 to 5% of the Continental armies. But more than double that served the British. Why? Because they were offered freedom by Lord Dunmore and other British commanders, which ultimately pushed a lot of the Virginia planters to side with the revolution. Why? They didn't want a servile insurrection. Now, again, this isn't unknown. You go to history class now, this is what you are going to be told. The planters in the South were the bad guys. The only reason they wanted independence was to protect slavery. This is why the American Revolution is so evil. But then, when it's time to tell stories on TV to the rubes, now the blacks are a core part of the story. Now they won the American Revolution, just like they won World War I. Didn't you play Battlefield 1? Just like they won World War II, just like they're the reason we got to space. You see this over and over again. And again, what is the point of this? It's to turn the whole idea of the anniversary and really of America's whole early history into a monument of shame. In a real country, if we had a real country, and you don't even know what that's like I barely remember it from when I was a little kid, and maybe I didn't even really see it. But when you have a real country, which nobody under 30 even knows what that's like, you have a shared ancestry, you have some connection to the people who lived here centuries before, a real connection. Something either literal or at least perceived to the revolution. And what would we be talking about? We would be talking about this is when we won independence. But what does that even mean now? What independence do we have now? Do we even have our own foreign policy? What does we even mean now? That's perhaps even more important. This was kind of the warning that Samuel Huntington was giving us with who are we? There is no we anymore. There is no scenario where you, as a white person, have common interests with these people. The entirety of their politics is get your stuff. And the indispensable first step to doing that is to deconstruct your identity. Why? Because from identity comes power, and they can break your collective political power by deconstructing your identity. This is what it's about. So again, am I exaggerating? No. Go back to the interview.
We're marking the United States' 250th birthday this year. And when you look back, yes, there are some incredible achievements to celebrate, but there is also a very ugly side to that history, from slavery to segregation. Where do you think we stand when it comes to racial differences in America as we mark this huge birthday?
I think what's interesting about America is that the history of America is written in blood. It's written in sacrifice. It's written in horror. It's written in terror. It's written in oppression. But it's also written in beautiful lyrical music that talks about what it could be, in foundational documents that speak to something more than what we have at this moment. I think you have to tell both parts of the story. You can't tell the story of America without talking about the impact of having enslaved people brought to this country against their will and then becoming a part of the building of this nation. You can't talk about all the amazing things that have happened in this country, the ways in which we have overcome, the ways in which we developed as a young nation, the ways in which we put forth a document to even declare our independence. And as the Second Continental Congress began to shape what it meant to be in control of the building of our nation, and then going to war and putting that stake in the ground. You can't talk about that if you don't include what was happening to Black people and the contributions of Black people. We have come a long way. We have a very long way to go.
You're going to hear a lot more of this in the months to come. This is what they're all going to be doing on every channel. And again, if we have to talk about it, fine. Let's talk about what the guy who wrote, Thomas Jefferson. You know, this is what they're going back on. But this is what Thomas Jefferson had to say about these people. Quote, "Nothing is more certainly written in the book of fate than that these people, which is to say blacks, are to be free. Nor is it less certain that the two races, equally free, cannot live in the same government. Nature, habit, opinion has drawn indelible lines of distinction between them." Unquote. Now, have the centuries since proven him right or wrong? Have blacks assimilated into a core American identity despite being here for 400 years? A European immigrant who showed up maybe 100 years ago is assimilated in a more meaningful sense. And what do you hear over and over again? You've heard this your whole life. You hear it from your teachers, you hear it from TV, you hear it from movies, you hear it from politicians. We've done a lot, but we have a long way to go. Yeah, we have done a lot. We've practically dismantled our entire civilization for these people. What have we gotten? Now you can't use public schools, public transit, public parks. Most of your life is spent trying to earn the money needed to escape the consequences of the civil rights movement. What else do we have to give up here? Like, when does the end of this process? Is it just when we're all gone entirely? And the answer, of course, we all know there is no end to it. It's just endless demoralization until the entire society is destroyed, as happened in Rhodesia, Zimbabwe, as is happening in South Africa, as is happening to the entire Western world right now. And reframing the American Revolution, instead of a fight for independence by a specific people, as a forever incomplete quest for racial equality, which is a stupid and impossible goal anyway, is all part of that effort. Now, it should be noted that King Charles III made a few cutesy jokes. I mean, this is his job, right? Essentially, the British sovereign is just a diplomat at this point. That's what they do. And it's fine. One of the jokes he made was about the British burning down the White House. Now, again, nobody's offended by any of this.
And if I may say so, it is a particular pleasure to be back in this wonderful building, the heart of your democracy. On this occasion, I cannot help noticing the readjustments to the East Wing, Mr. President, following your visit to Windsor Castle last year. And I'm sorry to say that we British, of course, made our own small attempt at real estate redevelopment of the White House in 1814.
Now, of course, I'm not annoyed by the joke. In a weird way, I'm kind of annoyed by the sort of playful joking about a shared history that very few people even aware or know about now, especially younger people, whatever, maybe that's spurring out. And obviously, there's a bigger thing about how the monarchy has done nothing while the British people are being replaced in their own homeland, but that's a separate issue. But there is another point here. People respond to this joke about the British, burning down the White House. They either roll their eyes or there's a sensible chuckle. Oh, isn't that funny? There's no anger. There's nothing like that, but kind of weird when you think about it. It was a war. People died. They burned the White House down. This is the kind of thing that nations historically hold grudges over, but nobody cares. Think about why. We're always told about the need for reconciliation with non-whites. And how do we do that? We have to pay reparations. We have to have a commission. We have to do some remembrance thing where we hit ourselves and whip ourselves and talk about how ashamed we are. And this will lead to reconciliation. And this will lead to unity. But will it? No, of course it won't. Why? It'll make things worse. It'll make divisions greater. It's designed to make divisions greater. Why? Because if you establish an incentive where people can make money and gain status by saying they're offended, guess what? They're always going to be offended. Sometimes you just have to get over it. You have to get over it to the point where people just forget about it entirely. I mean, that's why British and Americans get along now, because nobody cares about this stuff because we don't bring it up over and over again. I mean, this is the story of how the British and Americans became allies. We just kind of got over it. Use a more relevant example. Think of the Japanese and Americans. Way more serious grievances, way more recently. But think about it. Would Japanese-American relations be better if Tokyo taught its kids the need to avenge the atomic bombs? If America had a museum about Unit 731 in every single city and went nuts about war crimes every single day? No. Of course that wouldn't make people get along. So maybe you should think a little bit about what the real agenda is when they have museums for other things in American cities everywhere. Are they really trying to promote unity and reconciliation? Or are they just trying to incite people against you? Even if you think these things should exist for whatever moral reasons, nobody actually thinks it would improve relations. It would obviously make them worse. They are. Now, it would be tempting to say that we all know it's the past, and it would be absurd to hold a grudge over it, but isn't that the way most people make a living today? Non-whites anyway. There's an entire industry surrounding the 1619 Project and slavery, arguing that black slavery is the most significant part of American identity. It's certainly not a thing that anyone can crack a joke about, and this is happening in every Anglo country. The British Empire and the United Kingdom, the indigenous in Australia and Canada and New Zealand, every little country has something they have to obsess over. And even though it's centuries in the past, we have to remember it. We can't forget it. We have to harp on it forever. Why? And crack jokes about American Indians. They gave as good as they got, but we have to be ashamed about it forever. Hell, Muslims are still screaming about the Crusades, even though American didn't even exist at the time. The Indians, which is to say dot, not feather, they're still wailing about British colonization. Of course, and one thing I do like about what President Trump just did, he had something to say about the way the former colonies of the British Empire should actually feel about their experience.
Former colonies have no idea what they truly owe to this towering legacy of law, liberty, and British custom that they were given. We were given that, and it was a great, great gift. Tonight, on the eve of our 250th year of cherished independence, we turn to the sovereign embodiment of our British heritage and say sincerely thank you to our friends, the United Kingdom, for the richest inheritance that any nation has ever given to another.
The reaction to this will be good, especially in English language media. The United Kingdom, the press in the United Kingdom is going to be very angry about this. Why? They've reset their entire national identity as a kind of erasure project. I mean, in the UK right now, there are fears of colonization within England itself. What does that mean? They have efforts to bring more diversity to the countryside because it's too white, to deconstruct Shakespeare at his own birthplace, even removing the term Anglo-Saxon from universities in England itself. This latter bit has already happened at quite a few institutions. Remember, J.R.R. Tolkien was a professor of Anglo-Saxon. You couldn't do that now. A few years ago, the Daily Mail and some other papers reported this has happened at the University of Nottingham. University removes Anglo-Saxon from module titles to decolonialize the curriculum. Now, academics were, of course, concerned that if you say Anglo-Saxon culture exists, you're saying that there's a distinct English people, and you can't have that. Why? Because if you have that, you might have to admit that English people have a homeland called England. And then England isn't just the common property of any parasitic biomass that happens to float over. That would be bad. And it's happening in other places too. It happens everywhere. Now, what do they mean by this term decolonization? What you would actually call this is not decolonization, it's colonization. When you have elite institutions and a people's own homeland, the only one they have, deconstructing their identity, hollowing out their institutions, saying they have no claim to that territory above anybody else, and indeed the people who are not in the core group actually deserve special protections and legal privileges, that actually is what colonization is. That's what colonization looks like. It means that the people who do not belong in the territory get to lord it over the people who do. What would decolonization in England actually look like? It would look like remigration. They go home. They all go home. And there's nothing unique in this. Nobody actually opposes it. It's what the British themselves had to do from India, Africa, all these other colonies. In some cases, these are places where they lived for centuries. Same as the French in Algeria. That was part of metropolitan France. That was a core part of the country. It wasn't even a colony. The Portuguese in Africa, all these other areas, all these other European empires, they all had to leave. But now, if these people have to leave from Europe, that's bad. Especially, what's the most infuriating about all this is when you think of what the Europeans did in the third world, they built all the infrastructure. They created everything worthwhile that even still exists. And none of that makes a difference because the entire world, and let's not dodge the blame here, the US was a big part of this. The entire world decided that nope, they have to go. Certain peoples have an inherent right to certain territories, and white people do not belong in these areas. Again, everybody is a blood and soil nationalist for the people they actually like. But somehow, Europeans, white people, are alone exempt from having any particular territory to call their own. We and we alone are not allowed to have a homeland. And of course, the same nonce who cried for independence and decolonization, what was the first thing they did when they finally got it? They moved to Europe and America and kept crying. Because we know and they know they can't cut it on their own. Here we are. Now again, this is something that has to be pushed back against. We can't accept this narrative in any way whatsoever. And that's why I think it's good that President Donald Trump also straight up honored the British Empire. There's no other way to say it. He praised the one-time naval supremacy of the British and connected that to the supposed nobility of spirit of the conquering Anglo-Saxons. Listen.
But far beyond names and principles, there's something unique and very special that has always united our two people, a certain nobility of spirit and heroic soul. The same audacity that called a small island kingdom to rule the seven seas, and rule them you did, inspired the children of 13 American colonies to explore a great frontier and a very, very dangerous frontier and settle what was known as the Wild, Wild West. The men who planted the American flag on the moon carried them. The same hunger for adventure and achievement as those who raised the Union Jack above Antarctica and first sailed St. George's Cross all around the globe. The American soldiers who crossed the Atlantic to freedom, rescue in 1944 were moved by the same keen sense of righteousness that drove the English Crusaders to the Holy Land 1,000 years ago. The entire world has been uplifted by this distinct and special character we share, this unstoppable daring, this unconquerable courage. It really is. It's unconquerable.
Now, this is pretty cool. And this is something you don't get very often, where a foreign head of state comes and the people in the host country brag about how mighty and strong and majestic and powerful these people were, or at least used to be. Compare this to what happens elsewhere in the Anglosphere. Even with King Charles III, he's also king of Canada, right? He's head of the Commonwealth. He goes to Canada. He's technically the sovereign of it. What does he have to do? He has to bow and grovel before whatever stupid Indian tribe with a land acknowledgement. Listen to this.
I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and the Shinabeg people. This land acknowledgement is a recognition of shared history as a nation, while continuing to deepen my own understanding. It is my great hope that in each of your communities and collectively as a country, a path is found toward truth and reconciliation in both word and deed.
Like, how humiliating. Or consider what just happened in Australia. So on April 25th, you had Anzac Day. Now, for those of you who don't know, it honors all the Australian and New Zealand forces who landed at Gallipoli in 1915, were basically mowed down. The whole point is to honor the military. Sort of like their Memorial Day, right? But now it's a day to shame the actual Australians. So now they do this stupid welcome to country thing where they bring up some Aboriginal to tell all the white people, the white people, the actual people who built the country, the Anglo-Celts, the people who actually created the country literally under a policy called White Australia, that they don't belong, that they're just reluctantly being allowed to stay, for now, by the real owners, the Abos. Only this year, people booed the hell out of it.
Today, I'm here to welcome everybody to my father's country. Beautiful Boomerang country. But before we do that, as always, we take a moment, we pay our acknowledgements.
This is a major, major vibe shift. Just happened at UFC too. This happened at a lot of different locations. Now again, there's a dishonest game being played here. It's the same thing when they talk about reconciliation. Oh, how could anyone boo this? But don't you understand? It's about unity. No. If you are saying that these people, these gasoline drinkers, are actually the real owners of the country, and you are, and you're telling white people, like, look, we're letting you stay here, what are you really saying? You're saying that the white presence in these countries is entirely illegitimate. And you're also deconstructing the entire history of the country up to this point. And the critical point here, it confirms the idea of blood and soil nationalism. Don't lose sight of this. It confirms the idea that territorial ownership is ethnically based. Nobody is pretending that it's just, well, everybody has a right here. Everybody's equal. No. That's not what they're saying. They are specifically saying only certain groups have an inherent right to ownership and an implied right to expel those who do not belong. Everybody's a racist for the people they actually like. It simply gives this ability to non-whites, even though they had no part whatsoever in building the actual country. Now, of course, the anti-white media is going nuts. ABC, Australian ABC that is, has an article, a number of other outlets have it, booing during Welcome to Country at Melbourne, Sydney, and Perth Anzac Day services draws condemnation. Now, you got to love that journalist passive tense there. Draws condemnation. Yeah, from whom? Who exactly is upset about this? Evidently not the majority of the crowds. They seem pretty happy to boo. The journos are upset, the politicians are upset, the ethnic hucksters are upset, but are the actual Australians upset? Doesn't seem like it. An excerpt. Uncle Ray, and of course, they have to have these stupid little titles. Uncle Ray, whose family has served over the decades, told the ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, that he had a message to the hecklers. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. They have to show that respect to us as traditional owners, sovereign owners to this country, he said, unquote. Now, again, am I exaggerating when I say what this really represents? And by the way, no, they don't actually have to show you any respect at all, because you're making a claim to ethnic ownership. You're saying you're sovereign, but you're not. That's why Australia is part of the Commonwealth. Australia begins with Captain James Cook. You are not sovereign. This is British land. You aren't part of the country. You were allowed to stay in the country that others built. And they were nice enough, and it turns out stupid enough, to give you a place in it. But don't lose sight of what you are. You aren't owed anything. And the country would be better off if it returned to its traditional white Australia policies. And at some level, everyone in the country knows this. The whole point of all this is to delegitimize the very existence of white Australia on a day that's supposed to commemorate the people who fought and died for it. Now that's just terror. That's just straight up repression. That kind of a campaign can only be backed up by force. And God knows we've gone over the end of free speech in Australia often enough. Remember what they did to Joel Davis. Now, for example, this paper called The Riv promotes the idea that they need more police at these things because you can't be allowed to boo the system's pets. Ugly nonsense. More police call after Anzac Day boos. Again, there's that passive voice, right? Oh, there's a call. Where's the call coming from? Not from the journalists themselves, of course. We're just reporting on what's happening. No, it's the journalists themselves campaigning for this. It gets worse. The media literally doxed a guy who had the temerity to boo. There were probably hundreds of people booing, but they went out of their way to dox one guy. Now, to his eternal credit, he is not backing down. I have no issue with what he says here.
The welcome to country, it's not right.
Why is it not right?
Because it's designed to humiliate the memory of white Australia.
He's entirely right. He's entirely right. And of course, the media would never dream of doxing the people who actually attack the Australian monuments to the fallen. Hell, they're probably snickering and helping them get away with it. Now, from America's perspective, you can say like, well, that's not happening here. Look how Trump handled this compared to what's happening in other countries. Yeah, but let's be honest. Election result goes differently, it would be even worse here. And I don't think the right is just going to be in power forever, or even the center right, or whatever you want to call Trump right now. Things are probably going to change at some point, and it's going to get bad, very fast. It is still conventional wisdom at every newspaper, every university, every bookstore that America's founding is a monument to shame. The fact is that the 250th anniversary of the country does not mean much to most young people, and why the hell should it? Look at the demographic profile. They have no connection to the founding population. They are not assimilated in any real way. Insofar as they are assimilated, assimilation in the modern context means assimilating to what is simplistically but accurately called race communism. And that just means white people are responsible for every bad thing and would be better if we had never come here or even existed. That's what the campaign against Columbus Day and things like that is really about. That is the mainstream position. Trump is very much an outlier here. This is like legacy boomer patriotism. That's all that's happening here. And sometimes you see efforts within the Anglosphere to try to be clever, like, oh, if we oppose the English, we get to be part of the special oppressed club too, and then we get to be patriotic. You see this with Scottish nationalism. We need to get away from the English so we can have more immigrants or whatever. Look at what happened in Ireland with Sinn Féin. Sinn Féin literally means ourselves alone. Now what is it? It's just this insane left-wing open borders party, and it doesn't do anybody any good anyway. No one cares if you're Celtic. Nobody cares whatever special identity you've got. Nobody cares if you don't like the English. You're white. You're white. It doesn't matter what, you're white. You are therefore part of the oppressor class by definition. Full stop. I don't care what stupid theories you have. They have power. You don't. Deal with it. And if you want to play the game, you got to do what basically these Aboriginal leaders do, who are mostly white anyway, and you just build your whole victim brand on whatever part of your genetic lineage is most profitable. But unless you can claim to be like an 8th Aboriginal or something, you're white. Deal with it. The deeper question is this. Obviously, it would be extremely healthy for the United States to start paying more attention and even explicit tribute to the founding stock. And there are many ways we could do this. You could have the Grand Union flag displayed more often. I would even join the Commonwealth. One of the best things we could do is make Boxing Day, December 26th, a federal holiday. Put that in line with Canada and some of the other Anglo countries that have that, and everybody likes another holiday. And it is vitally important to say, no, America is a real country with real roots, a real identity, not just this marketplace or this abstraction that people came up with one day. And some of you might say, well, America is nothing but a marketplace now. Okay. But if it is a meaningless category at this point, you have to start rediscovering these roots if you want to reclaim this real identity or build the foundation for what comes next if this whole rotten edifice ever does go down at some point. You don't just get to build a new identity out of nothing. You have to draw upon something. But really, it's not just about America. It's about the entire Anglo world. Of all the countries in the world, England probably had the biggest impact of any European country. And yet, since the end of the empire, it's just collapsed into self-hatred, not just in England itself, but throughout the whole former empire. And America for now is better off, but not by much. We're on the same path. We have no position to shit talk. Now, what happened? How did this happen here? Insofar as America had a ruling class, it basically was the WASPs well into the 20th century. And the loss of what was essentially the ruling class in the 20th century, which was preceded by that population's loss of confidence and self-belief in its right to govern, that is responsible for where we are today. And if we think of that ruling class, you think of the WASP ruling class, especially if you're on the right, you kind of hate them, right? Because they're effete and weak and liberal. The remnants of it were basically in the New Deal and the early Cold War. When you think of like limp-wristed liberal internationalists, the Eastern establishment, that's basically the WASP, right? Like we're supposed to despise these people. But that wasn't true early in the 20th century. There was a real sense of race, a consciousness of being the ruling class, a belief in their own legitimacy. You had American leaders talking quite openly about Anglo-Saxons as the core American population. When Teddy Roosevelt led the Rough Riders in the Spanish-American War, he took with him a copy of a book entitled Anglo-Saxon Superiority. That's what he took to war. In a private letter in 1900, Teddy Roosevelt wrote, quote, "I am a believer in the fact that it is for the good of the world that the English-speaking race in all its branches should hold as much of the world's surface as possible. The spread of the little kingdom of Wessex into more than a country, more than an empire, into a race which has conquered half the earth and holds a quarter of it is perhaps the greatest fact in all history," unquote. And that was a fairly typical position for elites, especially Northeastern elites well into the 20s. Now, this is a hard thing to really unpack or prove, but I'd argue that one of the decisive shifts in world history is that the kind of WASP aristocracy you had in both America and the United Kingdom, of course, was essentially replaced around that time, really co-opted by an elite that was more Jewish, more rooted in economics than tradition and identity. In Britain, basically, it was wiped out by the Great War and then huge increases in taxes in the post-war era. Now, it's a big topic. It's a complicated thing to go into. How do you really prove this kind of thing beyond anecdote? Maybe that's for another day. But that's one of the big historical shifts that built the fallen world we're in now. We essentially lost our ruling class. They lost their faith in their ability and legitimacy. You read American or British elites even from a century ago, you'd be shocked at how they sound, how grounded in racial reality they really were. Or consider this, if you want a more populist assertion of all this, consider the South. Until very recently, Senator Ellison Durant Smith, Democrat out of South Carolina, he was speaking in defense of immigration restriction in 1924, a successful effort, by the way. He said the following, quote, "I would like for the members of the Senate to read that book just recently published by Madison Grant, The Passing of a Great Race. Thank God we have in America perhaps the greatest percentage of any country in the world of the pure, unadulterated Anglo-Saxon stock, certainly the greatest of any nation in the Nordic breed. It is for the preservation of that splendid stock that has characterized us that I would not make this an asylum for the oppressed of all nations, but a country to assimilate and perfect that splendid type of manhood that has made America the foremost nation in her progress and in her power, and yet the youngest of all the nations. I myself believe that the preservation of our institutions depends upon us now taking counsel with our condition and our experience during the last World War. Without offense, but with regard to the salvation of our own, let us shut the door and assimilate what we have, and let us breed pure American citizens and develop our own American resources, unquote. In other words, America first. More recently, hell, think George Wallace invoking the Anglo-Saxon Southland in his famous speech.
Today, I have stood where once Jefferson Davis stood and took an oath to my people. It is very appropriate that from this cradle of the Confederacy, this very heart of the great Anglo-Saxon Southland, that today we sound the drum for freedom, as have our generation of forebears before us done time and again down through history. Let us rise to the call of freedom-loving blood that is in us and send our answer to the tyranny that clanks its chains upon the South. In the name of the greatest people that have ever trod this earth, I draw the line in the dust and toss the gauntlet before the feet of tyranny, and I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
Now, I suppose you could trace the decline of the entire idea, because it goes from being the conventional wisdom of the governing elite in the Northeast to the populist, downwardly mobile rallying cry in the hated South. And of course, the white South is now the greatest villain of American history in the eyes of those who matter. And to some extent, this is basically the dominant narrative everywhere in the Anglosphere. I think it's pretty revealing that in California or wherever else you've seen illegal immigration be a major problem, what is the term they use for whites, for the enemy class? Anglo. Doesn't matter if you're actually English or not. And as a rightist, as a rightoid, as they say, I generally don't like the Anglo world in the 20th century. We were generally on the wrong side, against tradition, against identity, for the rule of the merchants and the traders and economic man. But that's not the whole story. The Anglosphere is also perhaps the best example of what rule by a responsible and patriotic ruling class can accomplish. And the objective of any revolutionary movement is to develop a new aristocracy. That's what it's about. And that's what's needed in both England, America, around the world. It seems that without the idea of the empire and the racial idea that underpinned it for most of its history, the Anglo world just seems to lose all sense of itself. And every once in a while, you see people, especially online, that broach this idea of the Anglosphere uniting. Yeah, that's romantic. I kind of like the idea. But what point is there if it just means a bunch of Indians on different continents under the same polity? But I get the impulse. When everything you have is being deconstructed, you have to go back to the roots to rebuild. That's what we have to do. And for America, that means going back to the founding tribe, the actual Native Americans, the Anglo-Saxons, the British people who built this country out of nothing. We were not born in 1776, 250th anniversary notwithstanding. We are far older. This country, the United States, has become the closest there is to a pan-European empire, as corrupted and destructive as we are sometimes. But it's ours. And you don't deny your country, you conquer it. But as we try to do that, we should remember where we came from. Put some respect on the name. This country was built by the Anglo-Saxon above all others, a pioneering and conquering people that built England and then built America. And it's no small thing that now this message has been taken up from President Trump's White House. One can only wonder if King Charles III is going to feel like he has to apologize for it when he gets home. Hey guys, quick reminder before we continue. You can follow Identity Politics on Rumble, Odyssey, YouTube, X, and TikTok. And if you want to make sure you never miss an episode, sign up for our email list. If you believe in this work and you want to help us stay fully independent, you can support us directly on Ko-Fi. We offer bronze, silver, gold, and white membership tiers, or you can give a one-time contribution, whatever works for you. Every bit of support helps fund production, research, and our ability to speak freely without corporate or platform pressure. All the links are in the description below. Now back to the show. Now, obviously, if we're talking about the Anglo world, we have to talk about Canada. Endeavour is one of the more intelligent and perceptive voices on the online right today, and I had the pleasure to interview him in Rome. No face talks, but we got into a lot of great topics. Check it out. What's going on, guys? Kevin DeAnna here in Rome. Welcome to Identity Politics, and I'm here with Endeavour. We're keeping them off camera because we don't want to face dox people. We don't want to be face doxed, but we're going to have a good conversation here because you've been saying some stuff that right exactly where I feel right now. Yeah, exactly, with these conspiracy theories. Holy shit, what has happened to the online right?
You know,
what are we doing here, boys?
It's something I've gotten kind of frustrated with in recent years because it started with COVID, and in those days, everyone was all into the conspiracies.
Right.
And at that time, like, it made sense. If you weren't into some kind of conspiracy.
Everybody had imperfect information, too.
Right.
I mean, so, like, you would say something, and it's like, but what else do you have to go on?
Right. Because, I mean, with COVID, it was just so obvious that the mainstream narrative was incorrect.
Right, right.
And everybody had to try to find, like, well, what is actually going on here? So I get it that conspiracy theories like really just took off after COVID. Now I know that they've always been a thing, but I think that one of the problems that the online right and the right-wing sphere more broadly has fallen into is that we haven't really gotten out of this mindset, and there's kind of just this mentality now that you have to just believe the opposite of whatever the mainstream says, so that everything must be some kind of conspiracy. So nothing can actually just happen organically anymore. Now it must be some kind of everything must be some kind of conspiracy. And what really got me to think about this problem and do some work on it was the Charlie Kirk assassination. Because one thing you noticed was that I think that some of the speakers mentioned this today, that after Kirk was killed, so for the few weeks after he was killed, a lot of people on the right, for the first time in their lives, actually didn't just imagine that the sides were reversed. They actually reversed the sides. Yep. And what they did was they found the leftists who had celebrated Charlie Kirk's death, and they doxed them and basically got them fired from their positions of power. Now, I mean, you can make this argument that, like, oh, well, you're just doing what they're doing. Well, what they're doing was working.
Right.
So it worked when they did it. And it was actually very effective. So there were, I don't know the exact number, but there were quite a huge number of radical leftists, people who believe that people like you and I deserve to be killed for our political views, who had positions of power, and whether they were teachers or doctors or journalists or anything like that. And that was very effective. But then what happened in the ensuing weeks was that all these conspiracy theories started to emerge that, well, did Israel plan the Charlie Kirk's assassination? Was Erica Kirk behind it? And like I'm a critic of Israel, just like most people on the right these days. How could you not be? But I don't think that. I don't think that everything that happens in the world happens because Israel planned it out.
Yeah, nobody has agency except the Mossad.
Right. It is possible that radical leftists just decided to kill somebody. And when you look at the official narrative, the official narrative is that this Tyler Robinson, a 22-year-old homosexual in a relationship with some transgender person, was radicalized to the left and thought that Charlie Kirk was the next Hitler. And it's in Utah. He got it from a conservative family, but he obviously departed from that. Got his hands on a gun and he shot him and killed him. And
it's a very plausible theory. I mean, it's not that crazy a thing to believe.
Right.
This is actually what happened.
And in the 6-7 months since then, I haven't seen anything that would convince me otherwise. So I haven't seen it.
There's like one or two things, but they're mixed in with stuff that's always made in bad faith. Like you saw that report a couple days ago where they were like, oh, they can't match the gun. And it's like, no, it's not that they can't match the gun or that the gun was rolled out. It's that, it's pretty hard to match a bullet that's been fired to a gun sometimes. You can't do it in every case. So they just can't use this one test to totally confirm it. But they didn't rule out the murder weapon or something like that. But you would see online, people would be running with this sort of thing, like, oh, this has been run out. Or Joe Kent saying oh, well, we didn't investigate this. It's like, but why would you be? I mean, there's just sort of a lot of bad faith stuff being thrown in there. And if you are this guy's defense attorneys, I mean, oh my God, I mean, how much have you gotten? I wouldn't be surprised if the main contribution of the online right over the last 6 months is to get Charlie Kirk's assassin off the hook.
And the funny thing is that the online right has become the biggest defenders of Tyler Robinson, a guy who thinks that they deserve to be killed, who quite literally would murder them.
Right.
And I feel like that like, so much of the right-wing sphere has just been consumed by this kind of podcaster network. People like Candace Owens. So when you look at someone like Candace Owens,
I don't think she's fundamentally changed since 2016 when she was hawking social autopsy.
Right,
it was that left-wing doxing website. I don't think she's ever changed her mind about anything.
Her history is that she was in the Obama era. She was this like.
Let me make my position on Candace Owens very clear. Fuck that bitch, and I don't want her in the country.
Well, when you look at her history, she was she went from being a Obama-era race activist to being that social autopsy, so kind of like a 2017, 2018 woke person who she made this doxing site to dox people.
Yeah. She was a left-wing non then. She's a left-wing non now. Like throwing around some holy water.
Well, I don't even know. I don't even know if she is left-wing. I think she's just somebody who is her views are whatever is expedient for her. Because then Con Inc. Picked her up and then made her this poster child. They made her the poster child of, oh, look, we can win over the black vote.
This is the great irony of it, is that because, of course, even though, like, I despise her. I have no positive feelings toward her whatsoever. But you see people who do things and you're like, okay, certain productive things have been done by this person, even if I don't like them, whatever else. But the productive things that have been done were basically because the conservative movement played itself. They put her in this position because they wanted to do the Dems are the real racist games. Oh, look, we found this person. And then they couldn't control her, and she went off the reservation doing these kinds of conspiracies and everything else. But some of which, frankly, are right, most of which now are basically wrong. But they were using her entirely cynically. And now they're shocked that she used them entirely cynically. It's almost like one of these situations where it's like, I don't like Candace Owens at all, but to a certain extent, hate the player. Hate the game, don't hate the player.
Right.
It's pretty remarkable.
But now that kind of the anti-Israel, which I'm anti-Israel. It doesn't mean that I like Israel by any stretch. But now that it's kind of become popular, that's what's become big on social media.
Well, there's no cost to it. This is one of the big things. Is people are like, you can't say this, but I don't like Israeli foreign policy. It's like, what else does anybody even say anymore? It's the easiest thing in the world to say. There's no cost whatsoever.
It's become so popular on social media, and I feel like Candace Owens just kind of jumped on that bandwagon after the Con Inc. one kind of ran out. I think she even briefly had a Catholic. She was in the Catholic.
She's still Catholic, I think.
Yeah.
Whether she means it or not, who knows?
Right. But it's entertainment. So I not that I watch her streams, but I saw she had 10 1-hour-long parts on Erica Kirk, and it's like this big soap opera with one conspiracy theory after another about how the Egyptians were behind it and the Macron family was involved, and because her big thing before the Charlie Kirk thing was trying to prove that Brigitte Macron was actually a man.
I think there's still a lawsuit pending on that from the French government. Be interesting to see how that plays out.
But the fundamental problem with all this is that it distracts from the main issue, because it kind of bogs people down in all of this, in all these conspiracy theories, most of which are incorrect, but are also kind of just irrelevant. So let's say, for example, she actually does prove that Brigitte Macron actually was a man. Well, so what?
Yeah, what do we gain from this?
What do we gain from this?
It's not like I don't already despise Macron. What is that? I guess I have one more thing to make fun of him for. I guess, but that's about it.
But it hardly seems like it's something to wage a months-long crusade over.
Well, this is the thing: is if you think about how when Trump got in office the first time, how this sort of madness of conspiracy was also weaponized by everybody on the right. But let's be honest, we were all kind of doing it. You had the spirit cooking thing. You had all the stuff you had Pizzagate. Pizzagate, I think there might actually be more to it, but there were a lot of charges, let's be honest, that were being waged in bad faith. This person's a child molester, that person's a child molester, whatever else. Clinton Foundation in Haiti, you could say, okay, well, there's corruption, but people were basically accusing them of running a giant slavery ring and kidnapping thousands of people and doing all these sorts of crazy things. And none of this was really proven. A lot of this was all just kind of dropped after the election. It all went away quietly. But it definitely helped Trump out in that campaign. It definitely painted Hillary not just as crooked Hillary, but also wicked Hillary, that there was something insane going on behind the scenes, because normal people figured, well, if there's all this smoke, there must be fire. And maybe there was, maybe there wasn't. But now this has turned on Trump himself, because his own former supporters are making all these conspiracies against him. And the people who I think he was kind of counting on to fight these political battles are off chasing dragons, essentially, that may or may not even exist.
I mean, I think that I don't want to I don't want to say that conspiracy theories don't happen, because they certainly do.
Yeah.
Like the big example is the Epstein one. That's pretty much verifiably true, as far as I can tell. And I think that's kind of just an open secret anymore. It's not even really a conspiracy theory anymore. But you see with that one, like there's just so much evidence behind it that I feel like if any of these other ones were true, like the Charlie Kirk assassination, or the idea that someone attempted to assassinate Donald Trump,
sort of the exception that proves the rule, then, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Maybe there would be this mountain of evidence. So, like, I don't like. There are a lot of these theories about the Trump assassination in 2024, and I don't really see anything to convince me that it wasn't just some like 20-year-old guy.
For the fact that they killed a guy, I mean, it's pretty.
There's a guy right behind him.
They're like, it's not the kind of thing you can just fake when there's a guy dead. And also, if you're trying to fake an assassination, you're cutting it pretty close when you're doing the thing. It's like, it wasn't a bullet. It's like, how do you explain the dead guy?
There was a dead guy.
That's pretty
right
good
behind
evidence.
him. And well, I mean, even if he didn't care about him, well, then he has to trust that this 20-year-old somebody
is gonna miss.
Is the best sniper in the world.
Yeah, the best sniper in the world.
Just graze my ear. I'm gonna turn my head slightly and then just graze my ear away.
But I mean, where do you think it's all going? Because at this point, this is where the market is, and I think in a lot of ways it's sort of safe edgy. Because if you say, you blame it on demons, you blame it on whatever conspiracy. Trump is in on it, but not really in on it. I'm just asking questions. I'm not committing. I'm beyond right and left. It's the elite versus us, all this kind of stuff. You don't actually get in trouble for saying any of this stuff. I mean, it's very safe in a way, which is a very appealing place to be in as a content creator, because you're never going to get kicked off. You're never going to get deplatformed.
Well, where it's going is it's not really going anywhere, because you look at someone like Candace Owens, it's just podcast after podcast after podcast, like milking Charlie Kirk and then Erica Kirk, and then after she had spent months milking Brigitte Macron, and it's just this endless stream of content, which it just serves as entertainment, and again, and it never goes anywhere. So in terms of actually,
I mean, I guess it's the real question.
It can't really go anywhere, because anytime somebody actually tries to do something, if I said like, well, okay, the elites are corrupt, we need political change, I'm going to start an organization, I'm going to start a political party or some kind of fraternal club, or I'm going to start an interest group, a law firm or something like that. Well, what's the response going to be? Oh, he's a Fed.
Right.
They got to him. Oh, don't sign up for this thing.
Shill.
Yeah, don't show up at this meeting. Well, he's a Fed. It's a honeypot. So I mean, if you think of something like Castle Pound, where we are today, something like this actually requires a coherent community. It requires people to have to trust each other, to trust the people that in your organization, that they have your back and you're going to have their back. And that kind of organization is impossible if you're starting from the position that anytime somebody tries to do something, it's a honeypot. Anyone who is remotely successful, they're a Fed. If something positive happens, well, then it was a trick. It was a trick. It was just allowed to happen for nefarious reasons.
Yeah, because it's unfalsifiable. I mean, this is one of the things, you remember like the kind of cringy new atheist days where they would say, oh, well, the problem is you're making unfalsifiable assertions. You don't have to listen to them. Well, a lot of these conspiracies are sort of the same thing, because no matter what they say, if I have a response, they're going to say, well, that's just part of the conspiracy. So there's no evidence I can present that will ever change their mind. So in a certain extent, debate is just pointless.
Right, yeah.
I almost feel like this has just become sort of the substitute for the true crime stories that are so popular among women. Now, instead of following true crime, they follow Candace Owens and what Erica Kirk did today.
Well, it's like a reality TV version of the X-Files.
Yeah,
it's just entertainment.
That's exactly right. Right.
And you can't ever actually build anything politically on
the monster. You get a new monster of the week every week, and the cigarette smoking man is, I don't know, the Mossad. Or whoever's behind the Mossad.
One day it's Klaus Schwab, then it's Bill Gates, then it's Mossad, then.
Well, what's really incredible about it too is because on the one hand they're leaning into this stuff, Israel, the Mossad, and everything else. But on the same hand, this is where the safe edgy comes in. But it's not the Jews. It's the Frankists. It's whatever weird clique. I want to be clear. It's not this, because Like, if you actually agree with it, disagree with it, but if you're like, well, it's the Jews, then there consequences follow from that statement, both you in your terms of your career, but also in terms of implied action items. Like, if you actually believe that, you would have to do something about it. But if it's the Frankists, or if it's whatever other thing.
The new big one is the City of London.
Right, yeah, right. Oh, they're going back to that, the square mile. Good
right.
God,
so,
we're going back to the conspiracy theories of the 90s here.
Yeah,
I mean,
like
give me a break.
There was this,
like, what do you do with that? There's no action that results. There's no political movement that can be formed upon it. It's not even demagoguery. Demagoguery at least like gets the people riled up. This just leads them nowhere.
And the people behind the things that are going on, they're pretty much in the open for the most part. So if like Tucker Carlson had this guy on his podcast, and he's another guy I've kind of gotten irritated with recently.
Same.
And the guy's on the podcast who's talking about Canada, and he's saying, oh, well, the City of London decided that they want to have mass immigration into Canada, so they funded this. And I'm thinking, well, okay, what about the Liberal Party of Canada?
Yeah, what about Trudeau?
What about Trudeau? What about the Century Initiative, which Mark Carney was associated with?
It's all right there.
What about the fast food restaurants who are saying that they want more migrant labor? I mean, I don't think it needs.
You don't need to overthink yourself on this stuff. Like, sometimes
it.
they're like, well, there's this nefarious conspiracy lying to the people, and then you have like a politician literally saying we need mass immigration to rub the right's nose in diversity, like that Blair advisor said about the UK. I mean, it's like, they're not making a secret about what they want and why they want it. Like,
it's the same with the Iran war. I mean, just look who's surrounding Trump. It's people like Witkoff, Kushner, Levin, and then they're all.
And they tell you
they're all Jewish.
They tell you what they want.
They tell you what they want.
You don't need to overthink this.
Or it's this Christian Zionist guy like Lindsey Graham or Mike Huckabee or Hegseth, and they're pretty clear about their intentions. And I don't think it needs to be this kind of.
The only thing left to debate is like whether it's good or bad and what you do about it. You don't need to like unpack who's responsible. It's like that guy standing next to the president. I did it. There's just like this incentive on social media now to make it this big spectacle that they want it to be entertaining, and maybe it's not so entertaining to say, yeah, Witkoff is there and Kushner are there, and they're saying they're Zionist Jews and they want Trump to attack Iran. I mean, the other thing that the past couple of years have made me realize is that there really isn't that coherent of a plan anywhere. You look back at COVID, so this is where a lot of this kind of mindset did come from. People were talking about the digital ID and Agenda 2030 and the climate change agenda, and all that stuff is real. I'm not denying that there are people that want that to happen, but if their timeline was 2030 and they were talking about this back in 2021, well, that was 5 years ago, and now we're only 4 years away from 2030. It doesn't seem like we've gotten any closer to that. Now, I'm not saying that agenda didn't exist, but it's evidence that it's not actually just they don't have this master plan to. Well, it's almost
implement.
like they don't need one. I mean, this is one of the things is sometimes people will be like, well, we have to explain this, we have to explain who's behind it and everything else. And it's like, look, the problem is like people will see what's happening right in front of them, whether it's mass immigration, whether it's crime, whether it's something personal. Like, their own daughter is killed by a migrant or something like that. And you still can't get them to react. Like, if you can't get people to even get mad about this thing that just happened to them directly, what difference does it make if I have an elaborate theory about who's behind it and what's motivating it? Because you're still failing to get people mad about the thing itself. I mean, I often think, let's take one of the more popular ones, of course, and probably the ones that has a bit more to it than anything else. When Biden was giving this speech to a Jewish organization, and Biden was so funny with these because sometimes he was like Trump in some ways. He would say the thing publicly that you're not supposed to say. So Biden's giving a speech, I think, to a Jewish group, and he was like, boy, let me tell you, without this community, we wouldn't have gay marriage, we wouldn't have racial integration, and all this. And everyone's like, But the thing is, I don't think he was lying. I don't think he was trying to do like a weird thing. I think he was being like, no, and these are all good things, and these people were heroic and fighting for it, and we should thank them, and they're actually serving as a moral example, and we should praise this. And it's like, if somebody has that authentic position, what are you going to do about it? Because that's the issue.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're a leftist or a liberal, then if that were true, then they did a great thing.
You should give these people more power.
I think my favorite. You saw that clip that came out a couple of years ago. It was some Jewish girl saying like, our community was behind the Civil Rights Act and immigration, justice, and gay marriage, and it's like, well, from the horse's mouth.
Right, but I mean, there probably are a lot of people who are like, yes, and this is why we need even more power and control and praise and all these sorts of things. I mean, this is sort of the situation we're in. We're at a point now where you can look at the Frankfurt School, and you could argue like which philosophers, which movements, which foundations, and whatever else. I kind of use Frankfurt School as sort of a shorthand for a whole body of thought, but this thing now has a life of its own. You could say the same thing about Europe. I mean, certainly America is responsible for a lot of the injustices inflicted upon Europe, especially with the way the NGOs that we fund have pushed all these things on Europe. But now we're not funding those things. Now, actually, the Trump administration is taking away the funding from these bad things. Actually, the Trump administration is putting pressure on European governments to stop arresting nationalists and stop arresting them for freedom of speech. So at a certain point, like, it's not America anymore, right? I mean, at some point, this thing has a life of its own, and the European leaders are pushing these negative policies on their own people. In the same way that I think a lot of leftism in America, people sincerely believe in it to some extent. I mean, they know it has negative consequences, but they come to think of those negative consequences as a justified punishment for Americans.
These ideas might have been formulated by various mostly Jewish intellectuals in the mid-20th century. Think people like the Frankfurt School,
Marcuse, whatever.
People like Freud and Franz Boas and such. And I mean, it's an important thing for people to know in our movement for on an intellectual level where these ideas came from. But no, the average liberal, whether it's in America or in Europe or Canada or wherever, they don't know. They probably don't know who Marcuse was. They don't know who.
And if you told them, they wouldn't care.
Yeah, right. Because they've already imbibed these ideas. They really got their ideas because they saw the movie Schindler's List, or they saw they were taught about Martin Luther King in middle school or something like that. That's where their ideas really come from. I know, and you can draw like you can draw a line from something like, say, Bayesian anthropology or the Frankfurt School down to some a Hollywood movie that's made today. Mm-hmm. But you don't really need to in order to explain why things are the way they are today. So that they just imbibe this from the media that they've consumed. I mean, one example of what you mentioned, that a lot of these ideas did come from America, but it kind of has taken on a life of its own in Europe. Countries like, say, Ireland or Spain, a lot of them, they're ruled by these crazy libtard governments who are extremely pro-immigration, but they're not pro-Israel, though.
Right. So this is one of the things that I've noticed with Spain. I think the prime minister there actually recognized Palestine, and then one of the other things he did is he let in 500,000, Moroccans mostly, and they're going to give these guys citizenship. And someone was like, "Whoa, guess what? Foreign state was behind this move to push these Muslims into Spain." And I was like, Vatican City? Because it was actually the Catholic Church that was like pushing this, even though it means that it's going to be the Islamization of Spain. Like, I promise you, the Catholic Church has a lot more influence in modern Spain than like the Jews do. So, what do you do with that? Because at a certain point, it is people, I think, in full knowledge of what they're unleashing, choosing this. And if you're the Spanish prime minister, there's obviously good reasons to do it. He told us, again, they're not being secretive about this. He said, we are doing this to keep the far right out of power. Like, it is political self-interest. It makes perfect sense what he is in fact doing. If you are these separatist parties, you have very good reasons for doing this. If you are the communists, if you are the far left parties, you have very good reasons for doing this. But the question is, why do you have something like the Catholic Church going along with it? Why do you have like some ordinary Spaniards going along with it? And I think they did this through like a royal decree. Do you remember this? They didn't even get it through the parliament. Why is the king going along with it? So, these are the questions.
They've just imbibed this ideology. Yeah. And it also goes to the point that it couldn't have been like planned out that far in advance, because a lot of, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the intellectuals that created these ideas were Jewish. And now it's kind of being used against the state of Israel. So the same kind of the post-war morality, the egalitarian universalism, is now being used against the state of Israel. Now, many of the people that started this were Jewish themselves, and many of them were even Zionists themselves. But they've kind of created like a Frankenstein's monster. So
a golem, if you will.
Right. Yeah. I mean it's like the story of Frankenstein, where he creates this monster and then the monster comes back to eat him. And I kind of view like the far left today is in some ways kind of a Frankenstein monster for the organized Jewish community, because they're the reason that there are so many non-whites in the West. They were the loudest advocates of that, and they advocated this policy of the idea of that the nation state is wrong, and that we are all the world, and race is just a social construct. Well, now that's being applied to Israel. It's kind of coming back to bite them.
But I mean, the question then becomes, and I do want to move on to some other things right after this, but it is a real consideration. If people really believe this stuff, if this monster is taking on a life of its own, and eventually it eats its creator, we're still stuck with the monster.
Right.
I mean, like this is kind of one of the things. I mean, like, let's put it in a direct, like, go all the way here, because I've never really heard a good answer to this question. It's like, let's say you get what I think is probably on a long enough timeline, the most likely outcome for Israel. I think this is what Richard Nixon said to Buchanan. He said, Buchanan asked Nixon about whether he thought Israel would survive long term, and Nixon supposedly just went like this. And it was purely just because of demographics. On a long enough timeline, you probably end up with kind of a one-state solution where the Palestinians and the Israelis are in the same place. You have various legal guarantees. Oh, everybody can live here. But the Palestinians will have the majority, and it'll just become, another Arab country, another third world country, and that's it. You won't have Israel as like the Jewish state anymore at some point. Say that happens. Then what?
Well,
what do we do?
Do
we get a prize? Like, what happens?
It doesn't actually necessarily benefit us, because all of these non-whites that are now in the West.
I've never heard this literally explained.
Like, think about someone like Mandami in New York City.
Right.
I mean,
that's a perfect example.
He's not a hardcore Zionist, but he's still
not a hardcore. He's an anti-Zionist.
He's an anti-Zionist, but he's still like extremely anti-white. So that doesn't actually help us. The solution is that you have to eventually, you have to get people to imbibe a pro-white idea. One of the reasons I don't buy this idea that all of it was planned out in advance, and there's this 100-year plan, and everything that's happening today is being orchestrated, because we see that just isn't the case. Whereas, even look at someone like Trump. Obviously, he didn't have a very good plan for what he was going to do in Iran. If what happened in Europe, let's say, is that people just imbibed these ideas and it took on a life of its own, it's possible for them to imbibe new ideas. For example, I think someone like you mentioned the King of Spain, like the King of England today, who's also the King of Canada, King Charles. Like, he's just raging libtard, and he even when he came to Canada, he did what was called a land acknowledgement, which basically it's a horrible thing.
Yeah.
But, I don't know, though. Is it possible that his 12-year-old grandson, could he be on the internet? Could he be watching this stream?
Yeah, right.
Could he be watching this stream? Could he, a couple of years from now, will he become based in red pilled? And who knows? It could be in 30, 40 years. We have an extremely based king of Canada.
King of
Canada, yeah. And that's it's possible.
But Canada is a great example of what I'm talking about, because you have poll after poll after poll showing for a long time. This is the Trudeau, the junior. Everybody was very unhappy with the way Canadian policy was going, and it looked like he was going to lose. And then, of course, the Liberal government under a new leader got reelected. They're still in power, and everybody blamed Trump because elbows up and the annexation threats and everything else. But he's still popular, so it's not really Trump anymore. People seem to be like, no, we want this. And yet in the same breath, they'll complain about immigration, they'll complain about the cost of living, they'll complain about housing prices being too high and how nobody can get jobs anymore and everything else. And then it's like, well, what do we do about it? We re-elect the liberals again. There does seem to be almost like a death wish in some of these societies.
So the truckers' protest, it was cool to see back in 2022, and it was necessary at the time, but there's kind of this cohort on the Canadian online right that they want to recapture that spectacle so badly. So they want everything to be this spectacle, and it's a rather embarrassing story. Last year there was this ostrich farm, I think it was in BC, that they were going to euthanize the ostriches because there was bird flu or something like that. It was like something kind of standard that you'd see with animal control. But these kind of right wings, these slopulist influencers, they had this big protest at this ostrich farm, and they were filming themselves crying on camera when the ostriches were killed, and then Ezra Levant was selling ostrich T-shirts, and you know, you can tell that it was just this story that they latched onto, and they wanted to make this the next truckers' protest because they wanted that spectacle again.
Right.
And the thing is that had it been liberals that were doing it, they would have said it was woke. So,
You're crying over ostriches. What are you doing? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it was basically just this. They wanted a spectacle. But what I like about what the scene that's emerging is that it's a lot more serious and it's a lot more focused on Canada. It's something that's very Canadian centric, but also it addresses the fundamental issues. It addresses the fundamental issues and doesn't kind of veer off into this kind of this circus that you see with a lot of kind of the sloppulist right, MAGA inspired right. So I am happy with that development.
What are you going to be doing with Dominion Society in the future, and how do you expect to avoid falling into the trap of slopulism? Because at a certain point, if you're going to lean into electoral politics, it seems to be that this is inevitable, or for that matter, in terms of content creation and getting a mass audience. I mean, as we started this conversation with the conspiracies and everything else that, you know, capture everything and nothing, that tell you to do everything but also do nothing, this just seems to be the natural course of things. How does one escape that?
Well, I mean, I'm not a leader of Dominion Society. I'm a member, so I can't really speak for what they're. Well, I can't really say what they're going to do. The leadership of the organization, but
I guess your political direction,
right? So I mean, I've spoken to some of the leaders, and what they've spoken about is they want to hammer on the remigration message, but they also kind of want to branch off into things like, you know, talking about Canadian identity and maybe making some more highbrow content that's not just like short form. Like a lot of the stuff is short form so far. Maybe start like republishing some books that might be pertinent to our cause. I mean, what I'd like to see and happen in Canada is honestly something kind of like we see with Ezra. Casa Pound here in Italy, or things like you see in the Iranian movement, you see with the Afrikaners in South Africa, and various other movements you see around Europe. I'd like us to get onto that next stage, and I think there's a lot to learn from a lot of the progress that people have been making around the white world.
Sounds like a lot of exciting stuff happening. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks for having me on, Kevin.
Of course. So let's talk about elites. Sergey Brin, co-founder of Google. He recently just fled California because he doesn't want to pay the so-called billionaires tax that is probably going to be imposed there. So from the California Post, which is a satellite of the New York Post, Google co-founder Sergey Brin says that he fled socialism in rare statement ripping billionaire tax. Billionaire Sergey Brin has broken his silence on California's proposed billionaire tax, invoking his Soviet upbringing as new details surface on a tense showdown with Governor Gavin Newsom and his Trump-loving gut influencer girlfriend. Brin, the Google co-founder with an estimated net worth of $270 billion, discussed his family history under socialism and an extraordinary rebuke of the billionaire tax, which qualified for the November ballot after organizers submitted 1.6 million signatures. I fled socialism with my family in 1979, and I know the devastating oppressive society created in the Soviet Union, Brin told the New York Times in a statement. I don't want California to end up in the same place, unquote. Now, here's the thing. Google is not our friend. Certainly, it's been extremely active in deplatforming the right. That started right after the 2016 election. And as a number of articles have noted, Brin backed Gavin Newsom up until now. Open borders, more regulation. We got to stop Trump. We got to stop the right wing. We got to censor all this racism online. I have to pay more. Now it's a problem. Now we have to oppose socialism. There's this idea, you see it in things like Son of the Century about Mussolini, right? That the rich just bankroll the right to fight off the left. That's what fascism is. It's capitalism in decay. And they're going to fund these right-wing thugs to fight off these people. But that's not true. The rich don't do that at all. They mostly just run away. They mostly fund the left until the very moment where they get eaten. And they don't like the right. They really are left-wing on absolutely everything except not wanting to pay more. And here's the thing. If you're rich enough, you can always just move away or move abroad. Now, is this tax a good thing? No, of course not. It won't be limited to billionaires. It's eventually going to go to everyone. It's like the income tax. We all have to deal with that now. That originally was just the very wealthiest and the richest. Now we all have to deal with it. It's a wealth tax. It will eventually go after property. This is inevitably where it goes. It's nihilist and destructive and tyrannical, but here's the thing. If you're Gen Z or Gen Alpha and you don't have property, what do you care? The biggest problem with America is young people have no stake in the system. They have no real property. They have no chance of gaining real property. If you're white, you're also hated. If you're non-white, you're taught to hate whites and the existing institutions of the country. And the rich and the powerful enabled this. They profited from it. They're going to profit from it more when your AI gets some more ground. There's a lot of money to be made in hollowing out the country. The problem is, when the inevitable reaction comes, and it's coming now, they're not going to be the only ones who pay for it. In fact, they're probably the ones most likely to escape. We're going to have to pay for it. Now, I think some elites are looking around. They may notice that the return of socialism and an explicitly anti-white socialism is not going to go well for them, but will they act? The fact is that the average MSNBC-addicted boomer wine-ant is far more politically committed than the average billionaire. So we will see. But the bigger question is this. The future belongs to whoever can give young Americans, especially young white men, a stake in this system. Now, you're going to get gruel from the racial communists who hate your guts, but it's at least something. Gruel is better than nothing. Or we can build something new. We can build something incredible. But that is going to require some enlightened elites realizing that they're going to have to get these people in the game. They themselves are going to have to get into the game. And they're going to have to do it if they don't want to get eaten by the so-called new American majority. But that means they're going to get called names. That means they're going to have to be targets. Do they have the courage to do this? The future belongs on the answer. The future depends on this answer. I'm a believer in elite theory. A lot of people on our side say, like, oh, I believe in elite theory. The masses don't do anything. But then they go nuts when an elite starts moving to our position, like this proves they're the enemy. Well, if you believe in elite theory, we're going to need some elites on our side, even if only reluctantly out of self-interest. Otherwise, we're just playing a game, aren't we? Do we want to win this thing or not? I want to win this thing, but I also have a bit more idealism. This country was meant for more than just looting the white middle class. We were meant for more than just funding more fraudulent Somali daycare centers. But that's going to require people to step up. Will they do it? We'll see. If not, I have to admit I'm going to have a certain amount of glee in seeing these people get eaten by the very people that they funded for and enabled for so long. These people should have known better. And it is going to be a little bit satisfying to see people who should have known better lose everything they have. But the problem is we're going to lose what we have too. And in the end, we're going to get it worse than they will because they can flee. This is our country. We have nowhere else to go. I'm Kevin DeAnna. We'll talk again real soon. All right, guys, that's it for today's episode of Identity Politics. If you found this valuable and you want to see more of this kind of work, here's how you can help. First, follow the show and share it with people who need to hear it. We're on Rumble, Odyssey, YouTube, X, TikTok, and you can also grab the RSS feed. Sharing it is the fastest way for us to grow. Second, sign up for our email list so we can always stay in direct contact no matter what the platforms decide. And most importantly, if you believe in our mission and want to keep it going, please consider supporting us on Ko-Fi. You can donate once or subscribe at the bronze, silver, gold, or white level. Every contribution, big or small, helps keep Identity Politics independent and alive. All the links are in the description below. Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting. We'll see you next time.